I would say that this season we are basically getting beneath the surface of what was created last year. It's a more intimate view of the characters. Everyone's taking off their masks bloodier. It's more violent, but the culture was really violent. So there's lots of conflict this year.
Azione!
The scene we're shooting today is a scene when Cleopatra comes to visit Attia, Caesar's niece, in the more or less immediate aftermath of Caesar's assassination. And Cleopatra has one agenda, which is that she wants her son, who is Caesar's son also, Caesarion, to be recognized as Caesar's rightful heir. So that's her agenda, and the agenda of virtually everybody else in the room is to prevent that from happening.
The party that we've just shot is both a social gathering and a political gathering. It's as much a diplomatic event as a party.
I am hosting it because my female intuition has been alerted that she's some sort of a threat to me, so I want to check her out.
This is a scene in which we really see Cleopatra as Cleopatra for the first time. She kind of looks like the Cleopatra we all know.
At first it was quite hard because every time I was in costume, it just felt like it's difficult to feel like you're not going to a fancy dress party as Cleopatra. And for me, I had to really try and forget about all that. It's like somebody probably playing Marilyn Monroe, you know, everyone has such a strong idea of what they want from the whole image and the look of it.
We had some references and we went for a very classical Cleopatra's look, and which was maybe the most represented look in the movie industry. So we went more or less for this. This is the final look.
I tried to find feathers that I could make a dress like this out of. And I know that peacock feathers are a big symbol of Egypt, but I couldn't find feathers. I found this fabric, which is actually leather. It's wonderful because it moves really, it looks like metal. So I was hoping that I could do it with feathers, but it wound up being leather. Each piece has a life of its own. In that scene, there were only about 60, including the actors. But for the entire second episode, there's 768 costumes, and that's a lot for 1 hour of a television show. You know, it's wow. We've been really busy.
I think the main thing we learned from season one is what we can do well on a production of this scale. The size of things is difficult to gauge. What sets work best, for instance, you know, essentially what the best stories are to tell. So season two is a distillation of everything we learned from season one.
This is the most important new addition that we've made to the set for season two. And what we're looking at here is the area that we are calling the Aventine Collegium area. This is where all the stuff that comes into Rome arrives. It all comes up the river and it's all unloaded on the Aventine. And so this stuff would have been absolutely chock-a-block with fabulous things to get your hands on, to steal, to fence, to sell on in the black market and all the rest of it.
The original vision was to do the city as it really would have looked, which is gritty and grimy and dirty and smoky, as opposed to the cinematic cliche of Rome, which is marble halls and very clean and majestic. For people at the time, it was, you know, the first wonder of the world. It was huge and immensely impressive. But if you were on the streets, it would look dirty and grimy and noisy and chaotic.
And you're going to see this in all its glory. In rather dramatic circumstances, we see a walk, which Vorenus and Pullo do together. And they come out of the clubhouse and they walk through this area, which is entirely packed and filled with extras, all doing their unloading and all the rest of it. And they come up the steps that I'm standing on now and walk up here past camera. And it's one of the most, the biggest scale shots that we'd be doing probably in the whole season, and certainly in that episode, which is a fabulous reveal of this whole area down here.
This is where it all started, all the gangs. So each hill had a gang, and this is the Aventine Hill, one of 7 hills. And on this hill was the biggest beginning mafia of them all. And that's what we're exploring this season, is this gang warfare between the hills, and this is the key gang, the Aventine.
Another of the things that's happening in this season is that Rome is becoming steadily more lawless. And as there's less of a kind of top layer of state control, as that disintegrates and breaks down, what inevitably comes through is criminality. And that criminality got more and more centralized and organized around these groups, these collegiate groups. Where we are now is the inside of a new set that we've created for the second season, which is it's called a collegium. And it's sort of like the ancient Roman equivalent of the Bada Bing Club. The suggestion being that this is one of the wilder places that you can go to let your hair down in Rome if you want to have a good time.
It's a strange place. It's got a very strange atmosphere because it's actually constructed to be underground. This being the entrance here, you'd actually walk in, but you'd walk down, and underneath is a barrel vaulted chamber on its lowest level with a fully functioning kitchen at the back. But the change of levels and the wear and tear of the building, it's been many things before. And you never tire of looking at it because everywhere you look is just so perfectly done.
There is not a bad angle on this set. You can point the camera in any direction and it's nothing but layers and layers of texture. And it's sort of hard to sort of just decide upon how to shoot it because it's so good.
The script seemed to suggest that it was stairs leading down to it, so that gave it almost like an underground feeling, like a sort of catacomb sort of feeling. And then there was the idea that you're not quite sure where it all leads to, you can't see the boundaries of it, I suppose, in a way.
Seeing the new sets that have been built and the new storylines and all that kind of stuff, it suddenly, very quickly I became invigorated again to do season 2. So it was exciting to come back.
Brother, things are changing now. Whoever wins in Greece wins Rome. Some sort of peace will follow.
Our challenge here is to create the feeling of something big and historical and massive, but really stay with our characters and our little group of players from Rome. So the reason we're working so much back and forth is to make sure that we can fit the scope of a battle of this size in history into what we believe to be 12 minutes of screen time we'll be allowed to have for the episode.
So the last few days we've been shooting the Battle of Philippi. Lots of big shots, a couple of units working, big battle sequence. I think probably our only big battle sequence that we'll have in this series.
There were more soldiers on the battlefield at Philippi, which is in northeastern Greece, than in any other battle that we know of in the whole of the ancient world. So it was a colossal affair. And even what we're doing here, colossal by our standards, obviously doesn't quite come up to the scale of the real thing, which involved probably 200,000 soldiers plus on a single battlefield at one time.
And as with any kind of battle scene, it's a massive jigsaw puzzle essentially. Every department head, every technical area needs to be planned in great detail in advance and then all put together on a day with a great deal of attention to detail. The hardest thing in the filming is working out exactly how much of it you need and working out how large that jigsaw puzzle will be when you've finished it, because until you've put all the pieces together, it's not quite clear what you've got. It would be useless to us if we got an hour's worth of wonderful battle and no room for anything else. On the other hand, you can't undershoot and not have enough to really do justice to the epic scale of the thing.
This is massive. We're actually shooting with a lot of crew, a lot of people. We have 2 sets in the same time, main unit and the action unit. Action unit is working with 40 stuntmen, 20 horse raiders, and 200 soldiers every day for 6 days.
Of course, our foot soldiers use all the chainmail that we had made at the beginning of the series and our brass helmets. But each officer is individually dressed because the officers at that time bought their own uniforms.
And everybody has their own insignia on the front of their cuirass.
Yeah.
So this one here is Octavian's seal, which is a sphinx. The best thing about these is that they give you a six-pack without having to go to the gym. Obviously, I do have a rippling six-pack underneath here as well.
What we're starting to do is obviously any soldier that's on camera, we train so that they have that military DNA put into them. We put any extra in a costume, but when you put a soldier in a uniform, he has to hold that presence. This group here, they are practicing their shield and sword fighting. And another thing that the Romans done, it wasn't hack and slash. They went for the hamstring of the enemy. They went for the neck. Anything else was expended energy. To our belief, this is how they would have fought.
I think, especially on a job like this, it all kind of falls together and you kind of have to forget about a lot of stuff and just go for it. When we're out here shooting this battle and you're on a horse and you've been told to make the horse do a 360 on basically a 10 pence piece, and then also deliver a line as you're doing it, it kind of just falls together. You kind of forget about all the stuff, and that's what the training's for, so it prepares you that when you come out here and you have to do a scene like that, that you can just go ahead and do it.
What the production is doing incredibly well, I think, is making Philippi an enormous, confusing muddle of a battle, which is exactly what it was. It's a civil war, the soldiers are wearing the same Roman uniforms as each other, nobody can really see who's who, see who's on which side, nobody knows what's going on. And I think that's the really interesting thing about this battle, is that it was a complete mess.
This battle has 200,000 soldiers in it, and we only have about 80 real soldiers. We have quite a few shots where we only have, so many soldiers that are actually for real doing it. So we need to make all that computer generated, and what we have is actual 3D soldiers that sort of have artificial intelligence, and they know how to fight and attack and things like that. So what we have is the real soldiers, and then we'll film these guys all separately, and we'll try to, basically track them into the shot. We've been here over a week now, so we've been just trying to get whatever elements we could, because the unit that we're shooting, we're also doing all the action cuts, the sort of close bits of people getting swords through the head and everything. So it's just been sort of whenever we can get anything real, we're trying to have as much real elements in the shot as we can, and then only rely on the 3D soldiers when we absolutely have to in the far distance.
What we're preparing here is after he's been hit already on the neck, he's been hit with the sword on the neck, so it's an after effect. So we're just going to put some blood on him and have it pour down on the side. We have various thicknesses of blood which we're going to use in various colors and darknesses, so depending if it's arterial blood. We're not going to put a pump in this one because he's already hit, or else we would have had pulsating blood. So we're just going to use some thicker type of compost that this way will just ooze. He's been hit, he's dead, so there's no more blood coming out of him.
Well, what we're doing at the moment is we have an entire battle sequence set up, and part of what the Roman soldiers did was they used a formation called a testudo, which was taking their shields and covering themselves up like a turtle. And it actually was probably the forerunner of the armored personnel carrier or a tank, because inside that they could protect themselves against projectiles. In this case, it's arrows. So right now we're shooting a plate, so we can see it form, all these other shots we've done, and then Mr. Madigan here will put in visual effects arrows, but no one will know that. They'll look like real arrows. And we're doing a little interactive dust hits with the special effects guys putting dust pellets onto this, so that'll interact with the visual effect arrows.
Still the line. The biggest thing with my troops is that obviously all day long they're in 15 kilos of body armour, chain armour. They've got their weapons, their shields, their metal helmets. All in all, they're carrying an extra 35 pounds of weight of metal, which in the sun heats up. Underneath that, they've got their cotton tunics. They've got their sandals on their feet. It's dusty. There's dust machines in most shots because we're obviously replicating thousands of troops or charging around killing each other. So that is one of the biggest challenges, to keep them motivated.
Because it really is an army, and it's an army of willing workers, people who work very, very hard, 12, 14 hours a day in the sun, in the dust, and are happy to see that what they're doing is resulting in something that's really worthwhile.
So that's a difficult job, and my hat is off to those extras, because they've been great. Without them, we got nothing. And some shots we do look like big battles. We're doing them with 50 people.
Okay, on action. The war is over, but you're not celebrating yet. Everything behind you you've killed, and you are coming this way towards Brutus's tent.
Today it's the death of Brutus. Brutus and Cassius have been defeated in the Battle of Philippi, and Cassius has just died in Brutus's arms, and Brutus has decided to march into the mouth of the other soldiers, led by Mark Antony and Octavian, to his death.
It's by far the biggest sort of production I've worked on. Certainly the first sort of sword and sandals, horses, all that stuff is very new but very enjoyable. It's exciting to be challenged, to get to demand a bit more of yourself. And so in this, there's a little speech in this final episode, this is my final episode, where he says, no more running. It's in the hands of the gods. It's something, he comes to a place of sort of stillness in a way.
So that suicide of his is a heroic suicide rather than an act of defeat, in a way.
Yesterday we shot Brutus being killed and his mother being killed on the next episode. So if you rolled the dice, you never would have landed on mother and son being killed in 2 different episodes.
What I've been shooting here today is further humiliation of my character. That she feels that everything in her life has been destroyed, that she's been left with nothing, and she represents this by kneeling outside Atia's house, being covered in ashes by her body slave.
She's kind of lost her mind since the death of her son, and a lot of things have been going on between her and my mother, and she's come to be outside our house to put a curse on my mother.
Gods of the underworld, all that I have left I give to you in sacrifice if you will make it so. Out of that comes a reclamation of her dignity when she commits suicide in the Roman way, by putting a knife through her heart.
Servilia, in killing herself, wreaks ultimate revenge on Atia. And after that point, nothing in Atia's life really goes as well as she would like.
I'm leaving tomorrow.
Very well. Goodbye then.
The big challenge for episode 9 and 10 was creating Alexandria and Cleopatra's palace and that whole world of Egypt. Alexandria of the time was even more elaborate and grand than Rome. But on the other hand, we had very limited resources by this point to recreate Alexandria. We'd already created the whole of Rome. Can't go away and create a whole other city, so there was a lot of clever stuff went on. Production design did a great job transforming parts of Rome into parts of Alexandria.
It's amazing. The art department are amazing. Anytime I walk on a new set, I just think they're so talented. It looks so beautiful.
It's incredible. The craftsmanship in Italy is second to none. You can see it right here, you know. It's every tiny square inch is completely detailed. There's nothing, it's completely faultless.
It's mind-blowing. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me when I just walk out here. It's just like living in a fairy tale. It's everything you want it to be.
That street there about a week ago was, you know, just a Roman street, and they've redressed it and made it look like an Egyptian street, and it looks perfect. We're doing the establishing shot of the episode pretty much, which is Vorenus now living in Alexandria, and it's just to establish the street life and the kind of the exotic nature of this, you know, land that these guys have found themselves in now. The fact that Vorenus is kind of an alien in this country and everybody is frightened of him or distrustful of him, but he's quite happy with that because he wanted to get away from Rome and you know, and isolate himself from his previous life. So this is basically the big street scenes. It's good fun to shoot.
Last couple of shows we had to use CG a bit more probably than we had before because we were going to this completely different place. So we needed help with creating Egypt, with creating marine landscapes, and just the sort of the background of Alexandria.
We're in Egypt at the gates of Cleopatra's palace, and myself and my daughter Octavia have come all the way to try and sort of make some sort of a pact with Mark Antony. We're arriving full of expectations and anticipation to see Mark Antony.
Stop! We're in the court of Cleopatra, basically, and this is kind of the beginning of, you know, the big love affair between Antony and Cleopatra. I'm kind of standing by, waiting to, you know, basically cleaning up their mess. You know, they're like a pair of spoilt children.
I think the scene that I'm filming at the moment, the deer hunting scene, it's fabulous. It's it's so ridiculous. It's so extraordinary and just funny. Like, it's so funny. And it's, you know, just, it looks great, and I mean, look at those. I know, it's kind of like a Madonna Metropolis, I don't know, every teenage boy's fantasy, I'm sure.
Antony is teaching Cleopatra how to shoot with an arrow, so we've got a slave on the floor over on the other side of the throne room here, who is dressed in full antlers and deer head and skin, and then underneath it there is there's a chainmail underneath it, so they can fire the arrows at the beast as it goes across in front of them without danger of killing it. Although at the end of the scene we do kill it because the arrow goes into his neck. And I think there's a certain amount of a sort of smell of death in the air towards the end of this relationship. And I think that the court here is incredibly fearful that if either of our eyes should light upon them, they could be the next person in the deerskin.
They're having their wild years, basically, and it's a doomed moment because you get an idea that they've gone, you know, in a funny way, they've gone, they're partying.
So it became a very decadent, very debauched, very dark world that they lived in.
He has to die at some point, and I guess he'll die at the end of this series. So it will be bittersweet, but it's been a great gig.
Who's going to really tell the story of Mark Antony and Cleopatra in the way we're doing it again? I don't think anyone will for quite some time, but the idea that we're actually taking a piece of history and telling it as finely detailed as we are with good stories that we can identify with, you know, in today's world, I think then you really have something.
Just the amount of people involved, you know, loads of extras and everyone's wearing gorgeous costumes and it just feels really special to be part of it.
The crew and the actors and producers have been together for almost 3 years now and very much a family. So I think the great moment from this last year, the final season, was that personal moment for everyone of finishing the show and being all together and saying, you know, this is it. So there was a huge kind of sigh of, I don't know what, relief, sadness, melancholy, happiness when we checked the gate on that last shot.
Give yourselves